Clermont School Board meeting. Mr. Romano, please call roll call.
Thank you. Mrs. Brinkman.
Present.
Mr. Rudy.
Present.
Mr. Schaff.
Present.
Mrs. Delaney.
Present.
Mr. Chumley.
Present.
5 present.
I make a motion to withdraw to executive session.
Second.
Hold on. For the purpose of considering the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, and compensation of a public employee. We have a motion by myself, a second by Mr. Rudy. Roll call.
Mrs. Brinkman.
Yes.
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
Mr. Schaff.
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
Yes.
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
5 yes.
Motion approved. We are going to go into executive session and we'll return to regular session at 7 p.m. Okay, Mr. Romano, will you please withdraw us from executive session?
Sure. Mrs. Brinkman,
Present?
Mr. Rudy,
Present.
Mr. Schaff,
Present.
Mrs. Delaney,
Present?
Mr. Chumley.
Present.
5 present.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Romano, do we have any cards for speaking tonight?
We do not.
Okay. Moving on to approval of minutes. Mr.
Sure.
Romano.
Thank you. The minutes as presented are from September 28th, our last board meeting. Recommend approval of these minutes as presented.
You've heard the recommendation of the treasurer. Do we have a motion?
So, second.
Mr. Chumley, and a second by Mr. Schaff. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Chumley?
Yes.
Mr. Schaff?
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney?
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman?
Yes,
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
5 yes.
motion approved.
We have 2 donations this evening from the Greater Cincinnati Foundation. They are awarded to Summerside Elementary School. There's $650 for the hands-on mathematics for students with autism and multiple disabilities. And a second part of that is $1,000 to Summerside Elementary for Mindful Music. Request acceptance of these gifts as presented.
You've heard the recommendation of the treasurer. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
First by Mr. Schaff, second by Mrs. Delaney. Discussion?
Do we know how we got those? Did we apply or do someone?
I do not have that information. I can find out and let you know that if it was, but yes.
Yeah, I appreciate, and I apologize for not having asked that prior, but and not to leave you in a lurch,
We'll do
I
that.
just.
We'll get that info.
Yeah, I don't know.
Other than that, I don't have any other questions.
Okay. Anything else? Roll
Mr.
call.
Schaff?
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney?
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman?
Yes,
Mr. Rudy?
Yes.
Mr. Chumley?
Yes.
5 yes.
motion approved.
And then just, that's all I have for this evening, but just a couple of comments, a couple of updates for us. I know a little bit later on this evening, you're gonna have a presentation from Mr. Perry, and part of that may talk about, some extra costs that we had because of COVID. But just speaking kind of at a high level, just kind of up to this date, want to kind of add some numbers up so you get a kind of a big picture view of it. So the funding cuts, which primarily came from the state, over the FY20 year and into FY21, really amounted to about $4 million, 1.7 from FY21, another 2.5 for this year. So at the highest level, that's kind of the reduction that we're receiving. There is a little bit of offset to that. It's really outside the general fund, though. There was the initial CARES money that we were notified of before the end of the fiscal year. That's $1.1 million. That we are allowed to spend through, actually into the next fiscal year. The second amount of funds came for this year. That's $406,000, and that really has to be spent by the end of the year. So, or by the end of the December. So we're coming up to that. The third amount was the Broadband Ohio Connectivity Grant of $118,000. And Mr. Parise has acted on that pretty swiftly because we too have to have that spent by the end of December for that. So although there was a $4 million in the reduction to our budget over the 2-year period, there was some funds or a little bit of relief coming back to us of about $1.7 million for that. Stating that up front because, as you'll recall, coming up in a month or so, we'll be looking at and adopting the 5-year forecast as we go forward. So looking at the rest of this year and then 4 years out after that. So we'll be putting that together. The 2 big critical things, or really 3 things that we need to heavily look at. One, in Clermont County, this is a reappraisal year. Okay, so those values are coming in. The county did submit to us today a draft of what that kind of looks like. And there are some increases. We'll get a little bit more clarity on that when that draft is finalized with that. So there and there was anticipated some additional funding, because we're at that 20 mil floor. As that goes up, we do get some increases with that. So both in the general fund, and then because the inside millage is in the permanent improvement fund, there'll be some gains on that too with that increase. Kind of the timeline for the 5-year forecast is we'll get some of those final numbers from the county auditor as we look forward with that. The big uncertainty is what's going to happen with the biennium for 22 and 23. You know, if things repeat themselves, we may not know those final numbers until the end of this fiscal year, knock on wood, hopefully. We may know the governor's proposal sometime in January with that. So between now and then, if there's any efforts that we should put forward is how can we influence what that proposal may be, especially with state funding? Can there be a funding formula that is putting some of the school districts within the state back on a formula versus either at the floor or to be capped with that? So we want to make sure we look at that. We want to do a draft, kind of give a draft update at the October 26th meeting, kind of where we're standing. From there, we'll get with the finance committee and kind of vet through everything that's in that. And then we'll put that on the agenda at the November 19th meeting. Okay, so we'll be sending out some information with some of the little detail, or some of the details as we go forward with that. Okay?
All right.
Thank you.
Sure. Moving on to superintendent's business. Mrs. Adams.
Dr. Fultz is going to give the personnel.
Good evening, members of the board, Mrs. Adams, Mr. Romano. In front of you is the personnel agenda for October 12th, 2020. On the agenda today, we have the resignation of Rachel Kilgore, one of our teachers. She and her family are relocating to, I believe, the Cleveland area. So they just had a little baby, and we wish them well. We also have the resignation of one of our computer technicians. This agenda also includes the proposed hiring of a paraprofessional aide, 1 administrative assistant, 2 computer technicians, and the transfer of 4 classified staff into new positions. This agenda also includes the proposed approval of supplemental contracts for middle school and high school coaches, high school instructional leaders, a home tutor, a substitute custodian, and a school volunteer to help support our libraries. I respectfully request that you approve the personnel agenda as submitted.
You've heard the recommendation of Dr. Fultz. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Mr. Rudy and seconded by Mr. Chumley. Discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Rudy.
Yes.
Mr. Chumley.
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman.
Yes.
Mr. Schaaf.
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
Yes.
5 yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
item
Dr.
6
Fultz.
point, oh, is there a
Sorry.
question?
No, I was just saying thank you.
Oh, okay, thanks. Item 6.02, Mr. Perry is going to come up for the approval of the bus stops.
Good evening. So as Mrs. Adams just said, annually, we have to have board approval of the bus stops. So this is a regular process that we do, usually in the first board meeting of October. There are over 100 pages of light reading. So if you would like a copy or a digital copy, it was in the executive update, but we can schedule time to look at it if you'd like. What I can say is, I believe there might be 2 extra stops this year in there, or some very minor changes than the previous year. So with that said, I ask for,
The superintendent recommends that the bus stops and the bus stops for 2021 school year be approved as presented. These bus stops and routes are subject to change.
You've heard the recommendation of the superintendent. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Mrs. Delaney, in a second.
Second.
Mr. Rudy. Discussion?
So I reviewed every address on all 103 pages. No, I'm just kidding, but, it didn't seem, it didn't seem, it says that it's, I guess, ordered by description, but it didn't really say like which route, like cutoff on routes. That was my only, I don't wanna say complaint, but like
yes,
it's hard to tell. I mean, they're just stops, all the stops. It's not like this one bus or this one route includes these stops, and that's, I mean, I don't know if that was on purpose, or if it shouldn't,
Well, if there were more detail that you'd like to have, I definitely could work with transportation to get something on that would, so you'd like to see the stops by the route, like Route 32?
it would be, I
is
mean, yeah, I think it was just I don't wanna say out of curiosity, but I mean, it'd be nice to compare, does one route have 30 stops and one route has 60 stops? And then we
Correct.
could ask,
Question,
you
yeah.
know, yeah, but I mean, it's not a huge thing, it's not gonna,
Right.
you know.
Well, what I can say to that is, about, I'm gonna say it was about 5 years ago, we moved to more cluster stops. So that eliminated some stops, but, that's where, you know, you may have one pickup point, but you may pick up 12 children
12
at that
kids.
point.
I understand, okay, that's fine.
One of the things that would not be told in that detailed report would be if you've got one bus stop or bus that stops 60 times, to your point, and another that's 30, this could be a very rural area where the kids are a little more spread out and picking up one kid at a time versus over here where they're picking up in subdivisions and things like that. So I think we gotta be careful with the information that we're looking at to make sure that we're not being judgmental of, well, why this and not that, or, you know what I'm saying?
I agree, but I think that gives us information, you know, and I think more information isn't always a bad thing, sometimes it, but I mean, we could have that discussion, and how can we improve, you know, transportation, and not that we can tell Peterman how to do their job better, but, you know, we can ask the question to get, you know, maybe get thought processes going, and sometimes asking questions does that.
Okay, moving on to item 6.03.
We have to vote.
need a vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought we
That's
did
all
that. I apologize.
That's all right.
Is there any further discussion?
I apologize.
Mrs. Delaney moved, Mr. Rudy second.
Yep. Anybody else have the need for discussion? No? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Delaney,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy. Yes. Mr. Schaff,
Yes,
Mr. Chumley. Yes. Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
5 yes.
Motion approved?
Thank you, I'm sorry about that.
no.
Um,
And I
item-
was, just one point, I don't necessarily need it or want it necessarily for this report, but maybe in future, we can, I mean, it doesn't have to be overly detailed, but in the future, maybe then we can,
Absolutely.
I appreciate it.
Okay. In item 6.03, Centers of Excellence Performance, we have Mr. Perry today presenting on behalf of the operational side of the house. And just to call everyone's attention to this, the Centers of Excellence are about us as a district office, taking a look at our practices, coming together and integrating around the concepts of performance excellence, the concept of financial excellence and educational excellence, cultural excellence, as well as the West Clermont experience excellence, in an effort to really set all the conditions that we need to be a high-performing district. And so Lance is going to speak tonight specifically around his passion in this area and his leadership and his department that lines nicely to performance, because it's one of those behind-the-scenes kind of departments that works really hard to eliminate barriers for our teaching staff to be able to do what they're here to do, which is provide education for our students. And so he's going to talk about some of the goals that have been accomplished from the summer till now. He's going to talk about some of the COVID challenges that have shaped changes in operations, as well as kind of future forward thinking, what we have planned for the rest of the school year and what he plans to accomplish with his team.
Thank you. Well, with that said, I'll just jump straight into the presentation. As Mrs. Adams said, the Centers of Excellence in reference to performance is what I'll be speaking to this evening within the Operations Department. Oh, there we go. So first of all, I'd like to start off and say that most of the work we talk about in operations is kind of behind the scenes. A lot of people don't see it. It just is accomplished on second shift or early in the day. But with that said, also some of the things are right up front. The way our grounds look, people drive by that don't even attend our school. I noticed that. And in addition to that, thank you. In addition to that, something such as the transportation of students, very active, very, very present, very upfront. Our goal is always to complete our tasks, which remove barriers and distractions so that teaching and learning can take place with efficiency. We talk about this on a regular basis within operations, making sure we understand our core business. Some items of how we accomplish this by is transporting students to school safely and on time, fueling education with nutritious meals, cleaning and sanitizing classrooms, and having schools ready for the instructional day, and maintaining the facilities with the short-term and long-term plan. So we're going to start to go over a few of the accomplished goals that we experienced throughout the summer. A lot of work is done in the summertime while staff and students are on their summer breaks. And then also some items that we have accomplished here in this first semester. Our custodial and maintenance department did an excellent job, and we've discussed this before about moving the staff back into Clough Pike from Brantner to Clough Pike. Did a great job with that, but a lot of time and effort, and that was a team effort. We had custodians and from all over the district, and a lot of the maintenance staff help organizing that and executing that, and went very well. I always like to highlight the continued reconditioning of the middle school. That is something that we just continue to try to stay, keep that on as a priority, so they see us coming back year after year after year, making sure we're doing things like repainting classrooms, etc. We updated I think it was 4 science classrooms, where we changed they had areas in the middle of the classroom that had water and electric in it, but very outdated, not really usable. And we actually took that apart and put in countertops, etc., for them to be able to use in the instructional day, and they were very happy with that. We completed step 5 of our roofing plan, which is speaking to our short-term and long-term goals of the facilities plan. And then we also were updating the athletic facilities. We actually replaced both roofs on the dugouts of softball and baseball. And for the football field, we actually removed the second story of the press box. It was no longer, we did not consider it safe. And through our annual inspection, it was identified we needed to make a change there. And another piece that will be with each department, we had a successful startup to the school year with our COVID-19 procedures. That was a big thing. All the changes that everybody is aware of in their personal lives and their professional lives. Each of these departments had their own set of boundaries, set of rules, set of procedures that we needed to exercise and put in place. Our child nutrition department. This summer they worked with the tech department in creating scanning capabilities for our students. We actually provided lanyards and printed cards with a barcode on it to help assist students check out of the lunch lines. I believe that barcode can be used in media as well, in the media center as well, but it worked really well. Kind of a lot of work right before school started, just the timing of the program and when it was available, but everything's been working out great. We expanded the breakfast in the classroom program. Again, that was a little bit of the result of some COVID-19 procedures. And we just celebrated the Great Apple Crunch on October 8th. I'm not even going to try to say the name of that fruit farm, but I will say it's a local fruit farm that was just south of Sandusky, Ohio, was all the apples that were provided on that day to all the staff in the break rooms and also here at DO. And then every student with their breakfast or their lunch received an apple that was locally sourced from Ohio. And again, the successful start up the school with their COVID-19 procedures. Transportation, just wanted to highlight with them, we continue to talk about customer service areas that we're always trying to improve on, and one of those that we found out was with engaging with the building secretaries was being able to answer more questions at the transportation level when parents call in about their stops, etc. We were able to work through providing them the access needed and a series of questions so that we can tell that the person on the phone was the guardian or knew enough about the student that we were able to answer questions. And that really helped out the buildings, especially at that startup when there's not enough hands and phones and all that just happens annually. But that really helped everybody out a lot. Our district safety, this is always a topic that we try to keep at the forefront, of course. Safety is always a topic that we try to make sure is always a priority and always keep evolving. With the COVID procedures in reference to the safety, I'll highlight the district playbook. Now, what I will say to that is operations only had a page or two that they were responsible for out of that entire document. So cross-departmental, cross-district document. It was about 72 pages. A lot of work went into that with a lot of people, but it was an excellent, excellent playbook and an excellent resource. Also, we had the PPE and the sanitizer and equipment needed to get the year started up with the cleaning procedures for COVID in place. There was a lot to that. We were able to get that equipment on site, provide the training needed, and get it distributed as needed. Also, we spent some time doing some signage, as you've seen, to stop the spread, and some of the visual keys for keeping social distancing and other things of that nature. We set all that up right before school began. Recently, we began working with law enforcement on the security and vulnerability assessment form. This is a form that actually comes from the state. We will complete one for every single school. Lots of questions on there. It's about 5 pages of questions that we have to answer, and that will actually be reported up through our safe account to the state once it's completed. Transition now to COVID-19 impact. So just want to highlight, not really focus a lot of time on this, but still wanted to highlight the actual boots on the ground impact for each department. Transportation, we had to increase the amount of cleaning on the buses after the AM routes, after the PM routes, etc. The tracking of student attendance, they always have taken attendance, but this was more as a written procedure, primarily because when we get into contact tracing of a positive case, we need to know if that child rode the bus and who was also on the bus during that route. So we worked through that, and the drivers have been great with that. And a challenge was staying on schedule. When we're asking the students to make sure that they have to have a mask before they enter the bus early on, it's a new step in the process. But I must say, our community has done a great job. The kids coming ready to go to get on the bus and getting through those early couple of days of getting the kinks worked out on the routes is always a challenge, but they did a great job. And I'd just like to highlight that we did not have any bus route increases this year to date due to the offset of our online academy students. So even though we could only transport up to 48 students on a bus, we did not see an increase in our routes, which I consider is very lucky. And it just worked out that way to balance out that way. For the child nutrition staff, we had an increase of cleaning. The kitchen and the cafeteria tables, they created and continued a process for breakfast in the classroom. We have been piloting one at Amelia Elementary for, I believe, 2 years. But this was on a much larger scale. We identified some gaps, and so far I believe it's working pretty well, even though it is, we continue to tweak it on a regular basis. Also, the challenges of social distancing students for lunch. Many of our gymnasiums now are being used for the cafeteria, and the cafeteria is actually where kids stand spaced out to get through the lunch line. So it's just a different look to the regular day. But once we got used to it the first couple days, things have been flowing great. Also, we have the changes to the delivery of lunch. Obviously, the options had to be limited due to the way that we can deliver the lunch had to change due to the procedures. Also, the approved waivers. that we received allowed free breakfast and lunch for all West Clermont students. What I'm happy to report is that on Friday, Ms. McLeese emailed me and told me that that is now for the year.
Oh, for the whole school year?
That's correct.
Awesome.
So that is great news, that we'll be able to provide that certain level of service for our students. So, that was great news. As I transition to the custodial department on the COVID-19 impact, they probably saw the largest change to their workday, just that their tasks just primarily changed to one of sanitation, and especially during the day, and providing supplies to the staff as needed. But one thing I wanted to highlight was, and we talked about this with the principals at length before the year started, was the head custodian in particular works during the day, and they are considered the right arm of the principal in many ways. They complete a lot of different tasks and do a lot of things for the principal and the building all throughout the day. And finding that balance of we have to have higher levels of sanitation during the day, which takes away from those abilities of providing that level of customer service that the building has grown accustomed to. But working with the principals and the staff, they've been great to work with. They understand. Everybody's working hard and together, and so far, I'm pretty proud to say that I think our processes are working really well. In reference to our maintenance department, they actually sanitize the playground equipment every morning. So they are actually in charge of that, so that was a definite change to their normal day. Then also we saw a delay in shipments and also certain materials that we use quite often, that was an indirect impact that we were not expecting, treated lumber, et cetera. And there's been some challenges, including plexiglass, but I'll get to that in a minute. Also, I just wanted to highlight the fact that we had to quarantine a couple of staff members, which was a challenge when we're as limited as we are with our staffing. Our overall financial impact was approximately $150,000 due to COVID-related materials from the operational perspective. That covers the cost of the signage, masks that were needed, hand sanitizer, that even included the Clorox 360 cleaning machines which were purchased, and the plexiglass, which we have been waiting on, which actually arrived on Friday to our vendor, and the vendor was cutting those today. Mark is supposed to be scheduled to pick them up tomorrow and shift gears and build plexiglass barriers until further notice. And we will work with curriculum to come up with a rollout plan so that everybody sees, as those are getting completed, that we are getting those to the necessary people. Also like to talk about the shift in labor. We did not increase our labor, we just shifted what tasks they were performing on a daily basis. Again, I want to highlight that I consider this a West Clermont team effort. Our teachers have stepped up, our aides have stepped up, everybody has stepped up, including the parents and the students, quite frankly, to help assist in this so that it will make us successful with the procedures that we have in place. And I would like to highlight the fact that we view some of this as an investment. Training with my team is always important. So being able to provide that extra level of training in reference to sanitation, the use of different chemicals, maybe different procedures to make them more efficient, et cetera, I view that as an investment. So we're getting something returned from that. And the other thing is I'd like to highlight is that the Clorox 360 cleaning machines, in my opinion, are an investment because even in the post-COVID era, I believe that we can utilize them as a tool, especially in normal flu season, et cetera, as a tool that we can continue to use. Goals. Goals for the operational team for the second semester moving forward. We want to complete that security and vulnerability assessment form and continue to work with our local law enforcement. We want to complete the construction of the athletic practice facility. They should begin site work next Monday. They did send me a picture late last week of the materials on site not at the school, but at their structure, which makes me feel good that the materials that I referenced to before are actually on site and ready to go. We're going to continue the process of the abatement and demolition of Brantner Elementary. I actually have a meeting with the architect this week, and we are looking at a calendar, on the calendar of completion is putting that out to bid as early as the end of the month. So we're going to start moving forward with that process and get that moving. We're also going to continue to model the way of excellence for staff, students, and parents of West Clermont. We talk about that on a daily basis, performing, modeling the way of if we come and we're doing our pieces of the process correctly, whether that's being seen, sanitizing touch points, whether that's holding doors for our customers, whatever it is, we need to continue to model that way and set the tone. Keep on focusing on finishing strong and developing our plan for the next year. This is something we try to do annually, is we try to make sure that we sprint to the finish line. We don't take it easy in that last quarter finish, that we sprint to the end of the finish line, and we're always looking to become better for the next year. What can we do better? What can we become more efficient? And as we come to the conclusion of Brantner Elementary being demolished, we will then work on the new master facility plan with the OFCC. And with that, we also need to look at projected student enrollment and working with Decision Insight. If you recall Decision Insight, as we've worked with the past 5 or 6 years, we have continued that relationship. We continue to receive our updates. We actually received an update just 2 weeks ago, which gives us our annual report of expectation of growth. And we're going to continue to work with that and visit with that and allow that to help that be a driving force in our work with the OFCC and our long-term facilities plan. So with that said, that's what I have for you. Do I have any questions or?
I have a question for you. In relation to transportation, you had stated that the bus stop routes did not, or the bus routes didn't increase.
Correct.
Because of the academy movement. Do we anticipate for the second semester that we would, if we have people moving back into the classroom out of the academy, that could increase?
I would say, that's a good question. The way I would answer that is we estimated about a 5 route increase before we took into account the online academy, or before the reality of the online academy student numbers came through. So my estimation would be if we do see an increase, it would not be greater than 5.
Okay.
But I would think that would be if all the kids came back, and
Right.
I don't expect that to happen, but anyway, but we will, yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And then my second question is in reference to the message from Mrs. McLeese about the free lunches and breakfasts throughout the rest of the school year. That's awesome, first of all. But just to clarify, that is for the published lunch that's on the lunch menu. That does not include à la carte items. Is
That's
that
correct. That's correct. We get a reimbursed amount for every meal, and then there's components to the meal, like we have to, because we do
Right.
get that question a lot, like the kids don't want this part of the meal. Well, they have to receive the completed meal for us to receive the reimbursement.
Awesome,
Yep.
thank you.
Well, and forgive me if you said this, I just don't remember if you pointed out, the WCOA students, our academy students who want lunch do come and pick up lunch, and so they've had to add those
Yes.
procedures too. So if you said that, I apologize, I just missed it.
That is correct.
Okay.
Outstanding,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question that, in years past, UC Clermont was using the soccer field at the middle school. Do they still currently?
Yes.
Or I assumed that they were having their season, and
Yes.
so they're still using that
Yes, they
facility.
still
Good.
use our baseball, softball, and soccer facilities, yes.
Well, and Lance has been one of our key people in contact with the health department. So any of the facility use forms, all that, there has to be a process now that the health department is a part of, and he helps to oversee that.
Yeah. Yeah. We're working right now with our, couple of our elementary schools to try and work through a program for some type of fall activity, is what I'll refer to it as, so. But we'll figure it out.
Thank you for all of your hard work.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, item 6.04, Superintendent Comments. First of all, I texted Mrs. Courtney and found out that the staff at Summerside did apply for those grants, and that's how they got them,
Okay.
for that Art Federation.
Very
So,
good, thank you.
yeah, so that's awesome. We had a successful professional learning day last week on a Friday, and it was also our students' remote learning day. And Dr. Foltz and I and Mr. Ryle, we were around the district. We were visiting some parent volunteers that we wanted to say thank you to, and we also were visiting some retirees that we never really got to celebrate. And so it was fun getting to see the kids at home doing the remote learning. And no one expects the superintendent to show up at your door to see if you're doing remote learning that day, but we had our students doing exactly what they needed to do, so that was great. Yes, and it was really a great opportunity for our teachers to kind of collectively catch their breath, assess what was working well and not working well, so they could collaborate and kind of, help each other out. And in addition to kind of the remote learning and the technology and curriculum focus, there was some time dedicated to social media. We had our legal team come in and just help give a broad scope of what the responsibility of educators are when it comes to social media, when it comes to their private versus using in school, and just reviewing our policies just to keep everybody sharp during this season. So it was just a very successful day. I also want to say, when we were delivering those items, one of the things that we delivered to our retirees, because we felt so bad, we really didn't get to celebrate them in the way that we wanted to, and we just haven't had time to do it. So when we took a picture to their house, and it's a picture painted, as the tradition is here, it's a picture painted by former Superintendent Gary Brooks. And so it was just a very special memento for those people who dedicated so many years in West Clermont, just to kind of have a piece of the history here in that tradition. And so many of them, when they were surprised by us meeting them at the door, but they just talked about how much they missed our students, that they just feel lost without them. And so I told them they had a nice crystal ball for picking a good year to retire, but they miss our students. I want to celebrate the technology team. We are ahead of schedule in the one-to-one devices deployment. We really thought that was going to take us into November, and Larry and his team, through their ingenuity, creativity, and just resourcefulness, were able to pull this off by last week. And so now we are one-to-one, K-12, and there is still going to be some deployment and some work as we are still hoping to get those shipments of new devices, and they're not in the best shape of the world. They're not going to last and last and last forever. And so he's going to have to do a lot of upkeep and a lot of work, but now we have a device in everybody's hand, and the teachers and the students are enthusiastically learning the skills they need for if we need to go to remote. So we just want to thank Larry and his team for that. So now they're going to shift their efforts and their interest into, number one, there's some testing challenges that have to be worked through with Mrs. Preston and her team and Mr. Parise, because of just different versions that are available on each computer, what's required with each different type of test. And so nothing's easy around here, for sure. And so they're going to be working through those challenges. And Larry will shift his attention, as Mr. Romano had mentioned earlier, to the broadband support, where we're able to put hotspots essentially in each of our parking lots, and then making some hotspots available for individual students in need. So a lot of effort and energy is going to go into that to really just cut down as many barriers as we can. And that was on our roadmap all along in terms of our strategic planning, to really look at equity and being able to close barriers. And we're just, it's another one of those like positive outcomes of COVID that we're just able to accelerate. So we're pleased about that. So more to come. Want to talk a little bit about, well, first of all, there has been follow-up from our office. Mr. McCoy came and spoke to the board a couple weeks ago, and Dr. Foltz has been working with him, getting him the information that he needs. And he just had a lot of questions about how we're supporting our teachers and our staff and educating them about our policies. And so he's given us a lot of good things to think about, and he and Dr. Foltz will continue to work. And then Mr. Facito met, he spoke to the board last week. He was concerned about quarantining and what that looked like for athletes. And so I know that Mr. Gephardt, as well as both Mr. Collins and Mr. Ayers had all spoken to him at different times. I met with him face-to-face as well, just to sit down and kind of talk about being on that parent side of things. And in the end, I think what we ended up with is that we need to do some more work when it comes to our winter athletes and just really explaining the risks that come in with athletes and the exponential or increased risk for being identified in quarantine, especially as sports like wrestling, sports like basketball, it's a lot of high touch, high impact, high contact sports. And so what that means so that parents will go into the season like fully knowing what to expect. So we've just talked about some improvements that we can make. And Mr. Ogilvy will be working with the athletic directors on that part. Again, in a COVID-related topic here, just wanted to remind everybody of a couple procedures. Every Friday, we do update the COVID totals so that we are showing where we stand with our students, where we stand with our staff, exactly how many students are in quarantine. And those quarantine numbers are certainly our biggest challenge since we've gotten into school. In some cases, we have students who are on their second round of quarantining. So when you think about school starting August 31st and now 2 bouts of 14 days, it's a significant gap and a significant challenge for students who are trying to get back into the rhythm, trying to get back on track, and kind of doing things with 2 hands tied behind their back. So this quarantine issue and the large numbers, especially that end up being impacted at the high school with all the movement between classes and somewhat at the middle school, is not unique to West Clermont. These are challenges that superintendents and school districts are having across the state. So I've been in lots of conversations about it, and there's been lots of work to advocate for the health department and the governor to consider some other options to, and again, not to say that we are medical professionals and we know all the answers. We keep saying, let's follow the data. And the data isn't telling us that students who end up getting quarantined are actually end up being confirmed cases. It's a very, very small number in that because most of the cases are coming from the outside in. It's not 100% of the case, but it's most of the time it is. And so there's this possibility, the governor is listening to us. And we've been hearing through our health commissioner that there is this opportunity possibly for some school districts to pilot and kind of look at some refinement of the protocols that have been laid out for us. And so at this point, our health commissioner didn't want us to raise our hand and say we were going to be part of the pilot until she's able to understand a little bit more about what's expected and what the impact is. So that is something that she's been advocating for us and has been, tuning in to what her, her people at the state are saying, what the governor is saying, because she's on a call with him every week. So we'll just stay tuned for that. The reason I share it all with you, and I know it's still a little bit vague, is just to let our families know that we hear them when it comes to quarantining. It's very challenging. And it's frustrating for the kids. It's lonely and it's isolating and it's frustrating. But our number one focus is to keep school running. And that's the number one thing. So we'll do whatever it takes to keep school running. And if there's something that we can tweak along the way to limit the amount of kids on quarantine, we will do that. And so we might be part of the pilot, we might not. But it's something that we are advocating for from our chairs as superintendents here in Clermont County. The second thing that's kind of associated with this is substitutes. We always are challenged throughout the school year with having kind of a short supply at times. And we're just always anticipating with flu season coming up and the possibility of staff being on quarantine in higher numbers, that having a sub and to fill in these teachers' positions is going to be critical for our success to keep the doors open. And so what we're just crying out for here is that if you're looking for a job, and if you have a degree and you could get on our substitute list, we would love to have you here in West Clermont. So if anybody's interested to see Dr. Fultz, I know you all are busy with your day jobs, but we are in need of expanding our sub pool from a classified staff as well as certified staff that we'll be happy to take you. And finally, with our COVID update every Friday, that happens about 3 o'clock where we update everybody. We have heard that there's been a lot of questions on social media out there about COVID, maybe our procedures, what's happening. I know it can be tricky, when our county changes from red to orange or orange to red, and what does that all mean? What I'm hearing from the health commissioner is that really the outbreak in our community is more heavily weighted in the nursing home facilities, and that we're still, schools are still doing a good job, and the things that we're doing here are working pretty well, even better than expected in most cases. And we're not seeing just a huge reason that we need to alter our plan at this time in Clermont County. And so, but we're still hearing there's a lot of questions on Facebook or whatever. And so what I want to just encourage everybody to do, that our best method for us to be able to help kind of close the gap of information is that parents email us at info@westclair.org. We have somebody who daily looks at that, and that causes us, sometimes they're one-off questions, so we might just email them back directly. We might call them depending on the nature of it. Or if we tend to get like a rash of things and there's just a flood of information coming in, and we realize, oh, we need to develop some FAQs around this because this is coming from a million different people, and just trying to make it simple, we will do that. So the more you bring into that info at West Clair, because it's kind of our central point, the better we can create the hub website, and the better information we can put out there. So I think that's it from my list. Yeah, that is it. Those are all my comments. Any questions about anything that I had to share before we go on?
So I have a question about the weekly dashboard that's updated with numbers, cases, and quarantine and all that. That's not necessary, because I know this came up on a social media post about one of our elementary schools where on one Friday they showed cases, and then 2 weeks later they didn't show cases, and someone was saying, well, aren't people quarantined for 2 weeks? And
Yeah, it's
I mean,
just the information that week.
right,
So
and if someone's quarantined for 2 weeks, they might show up on Friday, but they started their quarantine on Monday. So, I mean, it's not,
yeah, it's because it's a moving number. Like we just say,
Right.
what we know is
It's a-
between these 5 days up to 3 o'clock is kind of where we start, because it is rolling. And we could get a call at 3:30 and the data changes, but that won't be recorded until that goes on next week's information. So we try to be as fresh and current as possible, but they are rolling numbers. And you could even have a kid, maybe 2 days ago they were on quarantine, but at closer look they ended up coming off quarantine. Well, we don't go change that document, because we thought that would even be more suspicious, I guess, if there were lots of changes in the document. So we just go with what we know in that week up to 3 o'clock on Friday. Thank you for that clarification.
yeah, thank you.
And one thing of clarification, if the student goes home for 10 days for quarantine, they're going to be on that for 1 week, not the second week.
Right, yeah, just when it's first found out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and usually it's if you're a student who is positive, that's the 10-day. If you're in quarantine, it's 14. Okay, thank you. Oh, you know what? I went to my comments before committees. There I go again, not paying attention to the details. So let's go back.
That's probably a good segue anyway. So
Okay, good.
6.5 should
Good segue.
always be just committees, and you do your thing.
Okay, thank you. I just saw the word superintendent and went with it. 6.04, superintendent committees. I know we have a policy session coming up. Is there anybody who would like to report out on any of the committee work that you've been a part of recently?
I have nothing.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll turn it over to you now appropriately in order to board business.
Okay. On our agenda this evening, we need to name a delegate for the OSBA Capital Conference. Each year, OSBA, which is the Ohio State School Board Association, it provides a conference for us for continuing education to help us keep up to date on federal and state regulations and just keep us apprised as what other districts are doing and maybe best practices. As part of that, we need to name a delegate to represent West Clermont in their delegate meeting. It's a 2-hour meeting. It usually is on Monday. It could be Tuesday. I haven't seen the agenda. But they ask for a representative for each district to help with voting on things. We are a voting member. You would be voting on who would be our representative as president and vice president of that organization. And then if there's any other activity or business that needs a vote on. And we would need to name somebody amongst us that's planning on attending this year remotely. that would be willing to attend that. And I think, Mr. Schaff, you were last year?
I've done it the last 2 years.
And I did it the year before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you like to continue in that role, or would you
I
like to
can,
have somebody
unless
else?
someone else would like to do it. It's a, I mean, it's a unique, eye-opening experience. I know I had, my first time doing it was, I got a little rambunctious, you know, with challenging some other districts when they were talking about TIFs and things like that. And I might have opened a can of worms, which I'm notorious at doing, but, you know, hey, you know, what's best for West Clermont isn't always what's best for other districts, so, but, I mean, it's, in general, it's you sit and you listen, and, I mean, it's a great program, and they have you know, good speakers, and usually you get the, superintendent of the state board comes in, and you see you know, all the other, school board members, because that's all this is other school board members from the other 600-some districts, so. I mean, if anybody's interested in doing it, you know, by all means, but if not, I'll do it again, that's not a problem.
Is anybody interested? Come on, not everybody
I'll put-
I
wants.
would love to, but I don't know what my
Work schedule and
other
stuff,
job
yeah.
is.
Yeah, yeah. And it will be during the day.
Yeah, so,
Mr. Chumley?
Is this usually an in-person thing, like usually?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so usually the conference is in Columbus, and it usually is, you check in Sunday, may have a little bit of something Sunday afternoon, a full day on Monday and a half day on Tuesday. We usually will try to go up, and I think you pay for 6 registrations, and then anything above that for the district is free. So usually we'll go up, and then a lot of our staff will go up for a day, depending on the agenda, to take advantage of that free, you know, education, continuing et cetera. So, yeah, usually it is in person, and this meeting is 2 hours, and it's quite impressive. You probably have, how many people you went to the in-person, how many people do you think is in that room? 1,000?
Oh, yeah.
Easily, I mean, it's very
I
impressive.
mean, you usually have delegates from all 600 schools, and then there's other, you know, other attendees, you know, outside, and they bring in, you know, usually, you know, a music group or something from one of the districts. Usually it's one of the board members.
Keynote speakers,
Yeah, or
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I mean, it's in the main hall. That's usually Monday evening. But, you know, the rest of the conference is, you know, hour and a half sessions, learning sessions on various topics that, you know,
Yeah.
are relevant to us and to the administration and things like that, so. But yeah, the conference is usually in person, over the weekend before Veterans Day.
But that's probably not going to be the case this year.
No, it's all
It's-
virtual.
It's absolutely committed to being remote.
Yep.
So if you were available, you would dial into the Zoom or the Uber conference or whatever they are choosing to use, so.
I'd give it a go. Yeah.
So if we do that, we register you. So if you don't go and one of us has to sit in your place, we would not be able to vote because we're not Michael Chumley. Just making sure you understood the
Yeah.
commitment.
Yeah, I'm down.
Okay, all right. Mr. Chumley would like to serve in that role.
Okay.
Does anybody have any objection to that?
Nope.
No? Okay.
Do
don't
we have to
need
vote on that?
I was gonna say,
or-
we don't need to vote
You
on
don't have to
that.
vote, you want an alternate, just in case?
Sure, Mr. Schaff?
Yeah, I'll be the alternate.
Okay. Yep. Okay,
Okay. You don't have to vote, it's an appointment.
perfect. Board comments, Mr. Schaff, or, Mr. Chumley. Mr. Schaff is that way, Mr. Chumley.
I have nothing to add tonight.
Thank you. Mrs. Delaney.
just thank you, everybody, for continuing the efforts to stop the spread. We're doing it.
Yep. Mr. Schaff.
Thank you to, Larry and Mrs. Adams and your team and everybody, the administration and all of that. I do appreciate you bringing up the hub and the dashboard and people directing their comments and stuff to the district, officially to the district, and not through social media. Not that I'm complaining about Facebook posts and things like that, but we're not the source of information. We can provide some information, but you guys are the source, and people that have questions really should just, I mean, they really need to go to the source. And, I mean, you know, I'm happy to provide what information I have, but I don't always have all of the information because I'm here twice a month, you know, and then an extra 3 or 4 days a month reading communications and things like that. But, you know, I'm happy to help where I can, but, you know, we're going to the source is really what's gonna, you know, keep rumors and everything at bay. And, so I appreciate that you're open and we have that available for our community. And, you know, I think that not necessarily every school district has that. So I think we're lucky in that regard. So, but other than that, no, I don't have anything else.
Mr. Rudy?
I'd just like to say that I appreciate and enjoy the Centers of Excellence presentations. Really keeps me abreast of what's going on, and I can answer questions to constituents. So thank you very much for doing that for us.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Just to remind the board here that we have 3 remaining board meetings for the rest of the year. Our next board meeting is on Monday, October 26th, and we need a motion to adjourn.
Well, and the third, in November, it's a Thursday, which is very unlikely. It's not usual for us. That's just another thing just to remind everybody why we're talking about board meetings coming up. It's a Thursday.
Yep.
When we're typically here on Mondays.
And I think we scheduled it that way because of the 5-year forecast and to get it.
Yeah, I think there was some room there was a couple different things that led to us needing to
Right.
make a change, so.
Okay.
And that's, because Thursday's usually a township, usually they have their meetings here, so I didn't remember.
Well, I
didn't recall.
can't remember, I'd have to look to see exactly where it is. It might,
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember if we got booted out of this room or if we, and have to take this to the high school. I don't remember that in detail. I just remember Thursday was going to be a thing, so.
Thursday the 19th.
November
Yes,
19th.
Thursday the
19th,
19th,
Yeah. And then to round out the schedule, Monday, December 14th would be our last meeting. Okay? Anything further on that topic? Nope. All right. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Schaff and Mr. Chumley, second. Roll call.
Mr. Schaff,
Yes.
Mr. Chumley,
Yes.
Mrs. Brinkman,
Yes.
Mr. Rudy,
Yes.
Mrs. Delaney.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.